Good. It's rainy outside.
Yes.
Just had a tree fall in front of where I am.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Had to talk to the old lady across the street and help her find somebody to remove the tree. So I did a good deed. So I feel good.
Well, it's been windy, surprisingly.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So all right. So dealing with dating drama is what we're talking
Dun,
about.
dun, dun.
Yeah. Yeah, and conscious dating, I think, is really what we're talking about and what we want to do,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I would love for you to define drama. What do you think drama is? I'm letting my dog out. Sorry.
Okay. Drama. Save your drama for your mama. Um, for me, drama, I think it's always going to be drama. I just think that it becomes drama if it's consistent and there's like no resolution and no communication to figure out how to not have so much drama, or a conversation to resolve that particular drama. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So what say more. If you were to say in one sentence, how would you describe drama?
To me, and maybe I have a high tolerance for drama. Drama is something that consistently appears within a relationship that seems to not be able to get resolved.
Okay, so it's a pattern,
Yeah, pattern.
a
Good one. Yeah.
negative pattern. I would define drama as unnecessary conflict and emotional turmoil in in a relationship. So it's painful. It hurts, and so we're dealing with dating drama. How does that definition sit with you?
So you said unnecessary?
Drama is unneeded or unnecessary conflict or emotional turmoil. So conflict would be the action, turmoil, emotional turmoil would be the feelings and emotions that come with it.
Okay, because the only question I have is, in a relationship, it's two personalities and it's never going to be like super awesome, like, chill the whole time. So would you consider any like pain point, emotional pain point, a drama?
That's a good point because there are triggers that come up and our relationships are an opportunity to resolve them
Mm-hmm.
and to get through them within ourselves because whatever's in us is going to come to the surface usually in a relationship, a romantic relationship. So is it unnecessary? It's unnecessary until it's necessary, and moving through it is someone is saying, I was just going to say feelings and emotions are extremely involved. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's definitely emotions come to the surface and it's unnecessary, and it's necessary until it's not, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and really what we're talking about is conscious dating, right? We're talking about how can we date on purpose with mindfulness, with bringing our heart. So how would you define conscious? I'm letting my dog back in. How would you define conscious as far as in the context of dating?
So conscious, and this is basing back on what we've been discussing throughout the previous podcast, is conscious is being mindful and being respectful of each other's feelings and being able to come together as two rational adults, and to be able to communicate and express, um, what do you call it, what you're feeling, and the other person reciprocates, and there's like a cool down period. If you guys have to walk away, you walk away, knowing that you're going to come back together and try to resolve it. So mindfulness is being able to put yourself in the other person's shoes, and be able to come from that place,
Mhm.
versus being triggered and immediately, which I mean, it happens. You get triggered and you just automatically, you can verbalize immediately that you don't like something or that person is wrong or whatever without you hearing the other person. And even if that happens at that exact moment, you can still pull yourself away and be able to come back and say, hey, you know what? Let my temper flare. I'm sorry. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you just really gave a perfect example of what being conscious is. It means you have an intention, I think, to live and in a way where you're growing and becoming a better person. And so that takes awareness. That takes being on purpose. And we're going to fall off and get back up, and we're going to fall off and get back up. Somebody says, I think a way to avoid drama is transparency. Yes, transparency and communication are really important. So let's frame this, Nada, and where we want to go in this conversation and what we want to cover. So we want to cover dating. Now, with dating, we're talking about when we first get to know someone, and then we want to cover when we get into a relationship and it starts to evolve and grow, how we deal with that, all in the context of having less drama and more growth or unnecessary pain and suffering, let's say. Does that sound like a good way to go with this, or do you have any other ideas?
No, that's great. And Misa, if you have any other suggestions on what you want to address, then definitely comment and we will touch
Yeah,
on that base as well, because we're leading, but if we can be led, that would be awesome.
yeah, it would. It would. And Misa, yeah, you certainly chime in if there's anything you want to talk about. So we get on dating. All right, just in full. Speaking of Misa and transparency, I'll be transparent. And what does transparency take? It takes vulnerability. It takes being able to be seen, which is what vulnerability is. So I'll try to embody that and be an example of that as best I can. I was divorced. Was separated from my wife of almost 20 years. I knew her for almost 20 years. About 3 years ago, over 3 years ago now. We've been divorced for well over a year, but we haven't been together. And I went out and started dating, and at a time when I really didn't have a lot of business dating. We all know what they say. You want to give time to heal, a year, 2 years, whatever it is. So who did that? You.
I
You
did it.
did that. I didn't. So you have been separated for how long, Nada, if you don't mind me calling you out?
It's I think 3 years now.
Yeah. So what Misa says, okay, so what Misa says is personal growth, I think, before getting to dating, the dating scene, people have to heal as a whole and overcome traumas, yes. So we don't bring that into future relationships. So it's great that you bring that up because, hurt people, and when we're damaged, we, I think, are attracted to and will attract other people who are hurt. And I can tell you from my own experience that if we haven't done the healing within ourselves, we're showing up needing to be fixed in some way. So there's really not a lot of capacity for love, because love is the ability to want to, well, we can talk about what love is, but it's a mutual sharing of our being, our true nature. It's being able to be there for someone. And if someone's hurting like I was, because the separation wasn't my idea, and I was hurting and I wanted to feel better. And I will be completely transparent and tell you that I didn't heal when I went out into I hadn't healed completely when I went out into the dating scene, and it was rocky and it was painful. So I have healed now and did spend time alone. And am I completely healed? No, but I would certainly recommend that. So what was your experience of being separated and your journey, Nada?
So during when I finally separated, I did meet somebody like really quickly thereafter. For the record, he was hot, HAWT, hot, you know.
Mhm.
Luckily, it was just a quick little thing because I realized that I was falling back into the pattern. So even just that small separation that I had from my marriage, um, really put in my face that I was nowhere near close to anything, and I was attracting the same pattern. And then at that point, I just said, no, no more. I need to work on myself. I have other priorities. I have my kids. I
Mhm.
have a household.
Mhm.
I'm not going to be distracted.
Mhm.
You know, I wanted to advance in work and stuff.
Mhm.
So I honestly, I stopped watching TV unless it was like Gaia or some really good documentary. But I have been hitting books. I have been hitting podcasts on YouTube. I have not even had time to watch TV.
Yeah, good for you. Yeah, so I see. Is this Misa? Yes, 11 years single, and as soon as Misa sees red flags, I call it out because it's not my job to heal that other person. Amen. So Nada, you really took time to heal, and tell me more about how I just if I would be not completely transparent if I didn't tell you I had done a lot of work up until the point for a couple decades on myself, but that damage that happens when someone's hurt, that needs to heal. But what I sense that you did, Nada, is you not only used this painful situation as you not only thought this is I need to be realistic and I need to take time to heal, but you used it as an opportunity to heal old wounds and to really grow as a person, I think, right? So that you really started your journey really hardcore when you were divorced, I think, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I didn't know I had so much other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was just the hurt of being betrayed, you know, of losing everything that I had.
Yeah.
You know, having to start over fresh at this
Yep.
age, you know, with two little ones. I honestly didn't know what else was there until I exposed myself. In the process of healing that pain, that feeling of betrayal, other things surfaced, which I had no idea. And then I started realizing, oh my gosh, these patterns come from way before. That was just the catalyst, what I experienced. But my patterns are from like ages, and it started when I was a child. It
Mm-hmm.
just came up. I had no idea that was happening, honestly.
So I think this is a great point, and it's something that's important to bring up is we want life to go smoothly all the time, right? We of course we don't want I didn't want that tree to fall out in front of my street a second ago, but things happen, and when things happen it gives us an opportunity. That's when we can grow. That's when we can become better people and fuller and happier people. I mean, there's nothing worse that someone could be cursed with than to have everything handed to them because, we all know what happens when someone achieves everything and then people start giving everything to them, or they never had to work hard for things and touch the hot coals the rest of us do. They can end up drug addicts and things like that. And I can tell you the worst things that happened to me ended up being my biggest gifts. And you're an example of that, Nada. So I think that's a beautiful thing. So I think one thing that's important to bring up is when something that's unsettling that happens, and so much of it happens when we're our age, when we're in midlife somewhere, things start to shift and change because the only thing constant in life, of course, is change. And we can either embrace it or we and surrender to it, or we can fight it. And the more we fight it, the more we tend to, when it comes to romantic relationships, we tend to want to feel better. And we feel better, we're more likely to use a person as a drug. And that is never, and I'm telling you from experience, and it's not the way I am now, but as soon as if I was to be completely honest, I wanted to feel better, even though I was a nice guy. I'd done a lot of work on myself, and I was not capable of showing up as a whole person. And so, to the degree that I was able to give, which was maybe 30% at that point, was what I was attracting and what I was getting back. And I don't mean that in a mysterious way. It's like the people who were willing to date me and the people who were willing to, and the way people were reacting to me had to do with what I was giving. And so I think a lot of it has to do with the degree to which we're able to the degree to which we're able to work on ourselves and heal is the degree we're able to give. And when we can give, we can have true loving relationships, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, and I believe too, it took me a while to understand this, but when you walk into a room and you can feel people who are like bad vibes or ooh, I'm not, I'll just say hi to that person, but there's something up with that person. You know how you get that feeling, the intuition?
Mhm.
When you're at a point where you're not doing too well yourself, that you're really just working off fumes, and those fumes are the 30% that you are willing to give to any person, you're going to attract that crowd in the room that is the 30% group. That's what you're
Good
going to
point.
gravitate towards, right?
Mhm.
Um, so it's that one was kind of mind blowing when I finally understood that, which kind of also put me back in perspective on the times where I felt like, oh, maybe I should go out on the dating scene, and I kind of just gauged myself as to where I'm at within myself. You know, how am I still reacting with my ex, for instance? If I'm still getting triggered a whole hell a lot, I'm not ready. So I actually use his interactions to gauge myself, because I should be at a point where I shouldn't even take it to heart or take it personally, or anything. So if I can handle those triggers, like a G, I think I'm ready now. Because, and I don't know this because I didn't try it, but if I were to go out into the dating field, um, then would every single thing that person does be a red flag or a trigger to me? And maybe it's just they don't even think about it. It's not really a trigger, really. It's just me because I was hurt for that, whatever example, am triggered, but it's not really a trigger. Does that make sense?
It does. You're basically what you're saying is triggers are in us and they have to do with us. And we can easily look at the other person and blame them, but we have to be responsible for our own triggers. And so you're bringing up a really good point is we have a lot of triggers when we've been hurt, but we all have triggers and they show up in romantic relationships. So that's why this is really a ground for growth, for conscious growth, for becoming more mindful, more full, and if you like the word, more to grow spiritually.
Mhm.
And so these triggers that show up. So how would you say, and what from your experience, and I'll share my experience too, that when triggers come up, you've started to talk a little bit about it. How do you deal with it in a conscious way, in a way that you can grow rather than we all know what it's like to just have a button pushed and we react and we
Yeah.
go off and we cause and sometimes we have to just clean that up and walk away and apologize and that kind of thing. But in the moment when a trigger happens, maybe I am saying to you, I don't like that shirt you're wearing because blah 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 or whatever, and it's trigger something into you. How can you deal with that consciously?
Well, the first thing I want to say before we go there, just because Misa brought it up, is everyone has their own journey, right? And everyone has their own levels of what they've hurt. So, like for me, it's taken me 3 years of just hardcore, nonstop, like growth. Misa took 11 years, as he stated earlier.
Hmm.
There is no too much time, too little time, no nothing. It just depends where you are in the willingness to accept the situation and
Hmm.
take that viewpoint, which is going to segue into your question, to look at the situation and see it as either something detrimental or an opportunity. So when those things come up, those triggers, you tell me that you don't like the shirt, you know, now I'll be like, okay, well, you're not wearing the shirt. Who cares? Like in my mind, that type of statement that would normally trigger me or whatever, I just roll my eyes behind my head, and then I'll think to myself, if you have an issue with my shirt, then I know you have way more issues happening inside of you for you to attack my shirt. See how I turned it around? And maybe that's a safety mechanism to say I'm not the problem and my shirt's definitely not the problem. It's coming from you.
So you're not making it personal. You're not making it something wrong with you. So that's one way to do it. So maybe I can use an example with myself. I'm not an extremely jealous person, but sometimes when I hear about an ex and with the person I'm dating, and there's maybe too much detail more than I'd want to hear about, then I notice I don't want to call it jealousy at that time. I'm like, well, I'm angry or whatever. But a way to be conscious is to notice that happening inside of me. And I'm actually saying something that's kind of the opposite. And it doesn't mean that what you're saying is not a good tactic. But another tactic could be something quite opposite, and that is when someone is has said something that's upset me, I want to point the finger at them and say there's something that you did that was wrong. Your behavior was wrong. You shouldn't have been talking about that, or you shouldn't have done that, or whatever it is. But instead, to take responsibility for my own trigger by just feeling it inside of myself and not being the reaction, but just being aware that it's happening inside of me, and maybe consciously breathe. And if I need to walk away, I walk away. But nothing happens that's rational from reacting rather than responding. Responding takes presence, and it takes some time between stimulus and as Viktor Frankl said, and we've brought this up before, and I'm not going to quote this exactly right, between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space is where you grow as a person, where your whole life unfolds, and you can grow. If there's not that space between stimulus and response, then we're just a reaction, and we're acting out those old patterns. So we say, well, why do we attract the same thing over and over again, the same person? And why are we in these same kinds of dramas that we get caught in? Well, one thing from my own experience and from what I've seen in my clients is that there's not that space. We grow in that space, I would say.
You're absolutely right. I've have learned that the best response is no response. So although all that stuff that I said, it's all in my mind, but I am not reacting to that comment. And what I've noticed, well, two things can happen. Either the person may feel like they're not being seen, so they get pissed,
Hmm.
or it neutralizes the situation
Hmm.
because there's
Hmm.
a pause.
Hmm. Yep. Yep. So there is the little kid in us, the reactive person who is emotionally immature that we all have inside of us, that wants to just point the finger and not take responsibility. But what you brought up was having our own triggers to take responsibility for them. Or another way that you could deal with it is, as you said, is to not take take that on as something personal that makes something wrong with me. And that, it kind of depends on what's being brought up that causes a trigger. So so our triggers come up when we get in relationships and we start dating, and we get to know someone. Of course, there is that honeymoon period
Mhm.
where everything is wonderful, and the thing is we're wearing a mask. We're wearing a mask whether we admit it or not. And I've been dating someone for how long? 5 months. I'm in the honeymoon period. I mean, I'm not going to kid myself. There are things, and we say to each other, there are you haven't seen all of me. There's things about me that you just haven't seen. And it doesn't mean that we're not authentic people, but you know, there's a lot of dopamine and a lot of love hormones that are what's the love hormone? Help us out
Uh,
here.
God. Okay, so what's serotonin? That's the happy
The
hormone.
the when when you're hugging. Okay, somebody help us out if you can think about it. Oxytocin is what it is.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but these chemicals that happen at the beginning of a relationship, they happen, and it's beautiful. And when we become intimate, you know, there's more of that that's released, and it kind of masks reality for a little while, and maybe not right away. I mean, maybe even right away things come up, but it's good to enjoy that, but also to honor that. You know, if we're in the game for the long haul with a person, it's about staying with ourselves and our authenticity and sharing what needs to be shared, which I think brought could bring up another topic, which is communication. So I'm looking at what Misa has says. Oh, response. Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. So communication is another thing. We've, you know, being responsible for our triggers is something that's important, and obviously communication is important. So uh, if you don't mind me asking, I forget, are you dating right now or no? Okay,
No.
yeah,
Not because I haven't wanted to. It just hasn't like come up. I'm not on a dating app or anything like that. I just
you're busy. I mean, for one, I happen to know your life has a lot going on. Um, so so communication. When does communication I'll be transparent and tell you that my my marriage, that was a wonderful marriage in so many ways. I think the reason it didn't work out is because one of the main reasons was lack of communication. And I think that my partner was afraid of conflict, and I think I was happy with the complacency of, you know, keeping things buried, and I wasn't even aware of it. So having with my partner that I'm with now, what happened? This happened, I think, last night. She I was washing dishes, and I had a pot that didn't have everything in it, and I put something over to dry, and it flung water. And she said, uh, "You're so clumsy." And I didn't react. I just felt it in myself. I'm like, what's that about? Okay, that hit a hot button, and it made me feel insecure and less than, and I didn't feel the way I wanted to feel, but it goes all the way back to my childhood, that trigger. But I let about 15 minutes go by, and I said, "Hey, I just want you to know that there was something that didn't really sit well with me, and I felt like it was borderline name calling when you said clumsy. It would have been better if you could have said something along the lines of, this is what you did, that maybe you could do something better with my actual action rather than
the name
generalizing
calling.
me as a person, you know,
Hmm.
because that's what that is." And she said, "Cool," and we gave each other a hug, and it was fine. But that's, you know, that's why, you know, communication is so important. If we let if we sweep things under the rug, things fester and grow. And I can tell you that my ex-wife, if she may end up listening to this, is a wonderful, wonderful person. I think that. We were both responsible for letting things stay under the surface and not be shared. And then things can just blow up. And that can even end a relationship, or we say things that we don't mean. So saying what you mean, to bring triggers back into it without letting the trigger talk, but we stop, we pause, we become present with what's happening inside of us. We don't let the reaction take over, but we stop and then think, what was that about? We take responsibility for it, and then we communicate with love rather than fear. I think that's so important. Like, am I coming from a place of love? In other words, am I coming from a place of trying to make this relationship better ultimately so we can be closer? And I will say, in that example, that's what I was doing. It was for the betterment of our relationship that I said that, not to be right, not to shame that other person. So we have to check our motives. I think is really important with communication. So what would you like to say about communication when you, in your experience, Nada?
Well, I think with my previous relationship with my marriage, it was not, the communication wasn't the same. So what I was saying was somehow not being communicated and processed by my ex-husband. So there was that, for whatever reason, there was a disconnect in the styles of communication. So I think you also have to understand, which there's a beautiful, what's that book called about this? There's like 7 communication styles. Are you a gift person? Uh,
Oh, the love languages you're
Love
talking about?
languages. That one right there. And I think it is very important. We never understood each other's love languages, in that sense. And it does take two to tango, you know. So it's very important to have that, to understand each other's style. How would you like me to present the information to you? Versus having that incident with the dishes, and then it came out of a circumstance, versus already knowing ahead of time that this is the style that I should be approaching you with,
That's a good
right?
point. That's a good point. So what does this person need from me?
Mhm.
I think is a good way to look at it. How do they need to be communicated, and how, and also with the love languages, and let's go over them. Love languages, it's a very popular book, but physical touch,
Mhm.
quality time, gifts, words of affirmation, and acts of
Yeah.
service. Those are the love languages. So there are certain things that people need to feel loved, and those love languages aren't everything, but it's how that person needs to be communicated with, and what that person needs to, how that person needs to be felt, the person, how that person needs to be dealt with. And I do know that the woman I'm seeing now, she doesn't like conflict, but she's very brave and brings up what she doesn't want to bring up, but she needs to give it some time. So I know that I can't shove things down her throat, and I can get passionate and want to say things and want to, I don't want anything swept under the rug. Sometimes I want to deal with it right then and there. And I know that she needs time to just be with it for a second or minutes or maybe hours, and I have to honor that, you know. So I think
Mhm.
that's a great point, Nada. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, things that I know now, right? And I think the other thing too, in my mind, which is maybe just a logical sign, is like, if we're in our middle age or whatever that we're at now, who has the time for this bullshit? You know, um, so it's better to open up the lines of communication now, so you know what you're getting into. And then as you grow the relationship, just like you said, you're still in the honeymoon phase, at least, the information's out there in front already. So you don't go into this relationship a year and then all of a sudden the honeymoon phase is over and all these things start popping up that hadn't before. So
Yeah.
it's like, don't
Yeah.
waste the time. Just start getting to know each other at a deeper developmental, I don't know, process or whatever. So you don't waste any more time for yourself or that other person.
Oh, you're talking about if you find out that you want to get to know someone as quickly as possible, so that if you find out that you're not compatible, you'll find out sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was just reading what Misa said. Yeah, communication is important. Languages all important, and not to be classified, because people because that's where people build communication. Yeah,
Yeah, so he's
miscommunication.
just saying not to label it, as a love language, and no, we just use it as a example of different styles of communication that would be closely to you or that person. But there's always, I could be acts of affection and also words of affirmation, so it could be, that combination. But it's just to like kind of globally get an idea of where you're at with relationship wise,
Yeah.
how you would like to be communicated.
Yeah, what you and it's not. I think it's important to say also, Nada, it's not just what that other person needs from us, which is beautiful, because that is how we show up in a loving relationship, in with love rather than fear, but also what I need, and how, not just how I need to be communicated with, but we use the love languages as an example, like Nada said, is what are some examples of what I need, and we have to be clear about that. So that brings up, what are my intentions? What are my goals? What are my values? So these things are really important when we start to date someone, right? That we know what our values are. And I've heard people talk about when they show up for, like my clients, when they show up and start dating, they're not always clear. And I've got to say, I've been the same way. When I had dated, I didn't know exactly what I wanted. I have to know what I want. Do I want to find the love of my life? Do I want a casual relationship? I mean, and to be honest about that too, so that you really are uh, attracting what you're looking for, and you're letting that person know what they're looking for. But and also on a deeper, in a deeper way, in a deeper sense, what is it that I want to share with another human being? What are my values as far as what do I want? What would be examples? Do you understand what I'm saying? Does this make sense when I'm saying what you want from another person, what your values are in a relationship?
Yeah, and I think that's very important because a lot of people go into relationships as a rebound. So you go in just because you don't want to be alone, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah,
So what is your intention? Is it just so you won't be alone? Are you willing
yeah,
to put up with the same crap or whatever so you can fill that void?
yeah,
Are you going in just to have like friends with benefits, which is totally cool too? If that's your jam, that's your jam. And you find somebody else, that feels the same way, and you guys have like, boundaries, so there isn't some sort of issue that may arise, like attachment. Um, or do you want to find somebody that has the same core beliefs as you, as for a long-term relationship, maybe possibly, lifelong companion in whatever sense? Do you want an intention to marry somebody? Because some people don't even want to get married because they just been there, done that. I just want my lifelong companion. I'll be true and faithful to you, but I don't need no, certificate to show that we are committed to each other. So you have to know what you want. Therefore, you can attract the person that wants the same thing as you. Because if you and I were to meet and I'm looking for the long term and you just want friends with benefits, that will not work out.
yeah. So know what you want, and then communicate what you want is really important. And you also used a word earlier, boundaries. Boundaries are so important. So have your values intact, honor those values, and don't. And you had another really good point, which is, don't sell yourself short based on what you want. So like, if this relationship isn't working out, it's so common, and I'm sure I've done it in my life, just not wanting to be alone. So being willing to be alone rather than in a relationship that's not meeting my values, my standards, and that's not only unfair to me, but it's unfair to that other person. So not falling into the trap of just needing somebody around. So it and it always goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, which is filling our own cup, being someone who has healed, done enough work, and then we can be with someone. And the partner I'm with now, we are both on. we have an agreement that we both want to grow and we want to help each other grow. And I'm not saying that it's a perfect relationship, and that's the point. We can communicate. We try to take responsibility for our triggers. We try to bring more and more awareness into things by sharing what has upset us, or seeing what where our insecurities lie within ourselves, and being able to, through that, become closer. Because I'll tell you an example of something that was really beautiful that I hadn't had happen. I'll be completely honest. I was dealing with that an example of hearing about an ex, and I didn't want to hear about it, and there was maybe more talked about than I wanted to hear about, and there was a little bit of conflict that came up. And we haven't had a really big fight, but there was some conflict that came up. We talked it out, and there was, after we got through the conflict where things were a little icy for a couple days, we talked through things. We reached a deeper level of closeness and a deeper level of heart connectedness and intimacy through the conflict. And it was a beautiful thing. So I think another thing is, I believe, is to not be afraid of conflict, to honor it and know that it's there. And that's what you brought up at the beginning. Drama is maybe not taking responsibility for our triggers and just reacting, but inner conflict that we deal with and take responsibility for can make the relationship, we grow as people, but makes the relationship even stronger.
Well, conflict to me is I don't like conflict, but conflict is very important because that's the only way I feel you will learn and grow, because it tests your thresholds. You have the fight, flight, or there's a third one, fight, flight, and
Freeze.
is that what it is? I can't remember. I thought there
Fight,
was
flight, freeze, and
freeze. There
fawn.
we go. Yeah,
Fawn
there we
is
go.
people pleasing. That's the other one. Yeah.
So, and it kind of goes in line of also in the workplace. If you want that promotion or whatever, then you're probably going to have to move up into a different position, which is going to have you have more conflict. But you're going to learn from that, and from there, it's a scaffold. You keep moving up and up and up. So to me, and I'm going to use you as an example with what you said with your marriage. You guys were complacent,
Yes.
no conflict. Everything
Yes.
was hunky dory. And
It
where did that
was.
land you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It didn't end well. But so the two things that I would talk about, there is such thing as being in a complacency coma. I've heard that from
Ooh.
my friend David Mailer. I like that. That's one thing. And another thing that's really important that you're bringing up is that when we have conflicts and we have things that we're working through, is there is a cliche that I love, and it's growth begins at the beginning of our comfort. Growth begins at the end of our comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're so whether it's a job or it's a relationship, we have to be able to move through, not around. So going around something is not sharing it or blaming. Two things really. We blame the other person, and we just, you did this to me. And that is not true. Nobody ultimately does anything to anyone else. We have to be responsible for our own stuff. But that's one way to avoid, is just to blame, because we're not taking responsibility, or just to get into a complacency coma and act like everything's okay. And then one day we blow up, or we realize we're unhappy. And nobody, you can't always say exactly, point to one thing as to why a relationship doesn't work out, but that is one. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and I want to bring that up because it's up the alley to what Misa was saying. Because the other one is just ignore, right? So, and he stated that, being alone for so long that you just don't know how to like be in a relationship. So you may not even want to be in a relationship because you've been so used to being alone for so long. Then what's the point at this point, right? But again, it's what you were just saying, is that you need to get out of your comfort zone in order for you to grow. So if you want to level up, if you want to experience something better that is going to come with, adjustments and things, then maybe the next step would be if they want to go into a relationship.
Yeah, I think it's important to honor how difficult relationships can be because we're allowing ourselves to be seen. We're allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, which, as we talked about at the beginning, is the willingness to be hurt, really, and through the hurt we can grow. But whenever there is pain on the other side, there is uh, an opportunity for pleasure. It's always, they're always both there. But complacency, it's more even keel, but we're not experiencing life as fully. And that doesn't mean that everybody needs to be in a relationship. And Misa, I don't know if you may be completely content being in not in a relationship, and love to hear how that is for you. And that's another way to go, is to find peace within yourself and to be okay. A lot of us are not wired a lot of us are not wired to be alone, and it is part of human nature to want to mate, procreate, and so therefore we have this need in us, sometimes to be with someone. So what did Misa say? Uh, this is so valuable. Yeah, that's a good point. So, yeah. So we've talked about our values. We've talked about taking responsibility for our patterns and our triggers so that we grow. We've talked about being able looking at what the other person needs and what we need in a relationship. I think a good thing to bring up would be attachment styles. um, I think it's so important, and these were all models, and there's just it's just a way to bring up kind of ways of being. But there is secure attachment, there's anxious attachment, and there's something called disorganized attachment, which is kind of anxious and avoidant. As I say, there's anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, disorganized, which is both anxious and avoidant, and then there's secure, which we all want to be, is just have that secure attachment. So if there is one person that sometimes who cares more about a
Mm-hmm.
relationship because they're wanting to have that person, their energy is always, so much of the time going out, and concerned about how the other person feels, and concerned about what that other person is doing, and concerned about, is this person going to leave me? And the other person can be more, to use the word complacent, they can be more aloof, and they're less comfortable with communication, intimacy, closeness, connectedness, and can be more avoidant. So the first example, obviously, is the anxious attachment. The other is avoidant, and then there's can be a push pull that people can have, which is the more disorganized attachment, which is, I want you, ooh, I'm going to pull back. And I think that's something I've fallen into in the past, is I want you, oh, now I need my space. And it's kind of, and this all has to do with our childhood and how we really defined love when we were a child, through how we saw it with our parents, usually, or our caretakers. So what's your experience with attachment styles?
I am 100% secure attachment style, looking for the security. But because I have had the pattern of choosing, what should I say, challenging relationships, what happens is I go in for the secure, and then I come like you, where I pull back. Was that avoidant or
Well,
disorganized?
there can be a push pull where, and I may be oversimplifying this, but there's someone who's more anxious, which is clingy. I'm oversimplifying. You could be more avoidant, which is more aloof and pulling back, and then there can be disorganized, which is both. You're reaching out, and then you're pulling back, and that and it's and a lot of the times with that comes emotional dysregulation, from what I understand. So yeah, I mean, we usually probably have some sort of subtle degree of one of those, but we fall into secure in our best moments, and some of us maybe, and maybe you, Nada, 90% of the time you're secure. I mean, it sounds like you've done a lot of work, and you feel like that shows up a lot in your relationship, is just a secure attachment.
I think, it just depends. I think now that you've explained it all, I always start off secure, but throughout the relationship, I hit every single one to the point where I'm finally just disorganized.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like I just go through the whole spectrum at that point. And it just seems like it would make sense for the, process of evolution of the relationship.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. There is a dance that we do, and there's the word, and perhaps it can be overused, which is that word codependency,
Mhm.
and co means to, and depend means to need, and so when there's that needing of another person, so we can deal with it by being avoidant or anxious or both. But you know what I'd love to talk about in a little bit more time that we have, because we started 10 minutes after. You want to end at 10
Mhm.
minutes after? Okay. So going from need to more of a healthy love. There's the need. I sometimes I think when we say I love you, really what we're saying is I need you. That it's even in Spanish. What does it mean to say I love you? I'm asking. Doesn't it mean I desire you?
Te amo
Te amo.
means
Te
I
amo.
love you. Te amo. Te quiero means
Te
I
quiero.
want you.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
want you. Oh, that's
yeah. Te
that's what I was
quiero is I
thinking.
want you.
Yeah. So that's interesting that it's kind of to want. But how do we go from how do we go from that feeling of needing someone, and we all know what the hell that feels like, right? I mean, we
Mhm.
we want to believe that our cup is full, and we just are totally okay being alone, and there are times in life when we can be that way, but we get attached, and there are different degrees of attachment. So how do we go from that attachment to more of a love where we're sharing it in a healthy relationship? Just a little small question. Nada, but what do you think?
That's tough because I think for the most of us, if they're kind of like in our situations or they're listening in, and I know for me, I'm speaking because of me, we were addicted to chaos, right? To the conflict,
Yeah.
or in your case, the non-conflict. I mean, it was just, it's still an addiction. That's why you guys stay together for so long. So there's there's an addiction there of each other, whether it's if it's the chaos, the conflict, or vice versa, just the peacefulness of it, whatever the case may be. Um,
I do want to say that it's not always addiction when there's love, though. I think you were talking about it. That people stay together because of addiction. That's not necessarily
no,
true,
I'm
right?
talking about they're addicted to a certain type of behavior. So they're used
Oh,
to,
I
because of
see.
their childhood,
Yeah,
they're used to that behavior. So for them, it's the norm. It was the norm for me.
yeah,
It was a norm for me.
yeah.
Um, and then when you find a relationship that is peaceful and you can have open communication, that may be boring for the person that's used to having
Yes,
those chaotic behaviors,
that's a
right?
good point.
So I think that's very important, because when you can, to me, I feel that when I get to the point when I find a relationship, which I will find a relationship that's actually peaceful and we can talk it out because it's now outside of what I've been used to like my whole life, my whatever, that's how I know that it's going to be a, a special kind of love, a special, respectful kind of love that does not need to have the previous behaviors, and it's only going to grow more. And I have to get out of my own head when I think, oh my gosh, this is so boring. Like, I don't want to be with this person. Then that makes me look more into the person's characteristics and fall in love with the person, not the environment, not the circumstances. It's falling in
Beautiful.
love with that person.
So, ne- and we're bringing this full circle because we're talking about, dealing with dating drama, and the drama can be addictive because it's juicy, it's exciting, and I have fallen into that. And really there is a kind of attachment that we as human beings have, that we think that if there is conflict and there's turmoil, that that person loves us, or there that cycle of drama, of you have this conflict, and then you have makeup sex, and then you have it's calm, and then you have more conflict, and you just get addicted to that cycle, and that's addiction.
Mhm.
But love is, and I will say, in my relationship now, I had to get used to the fact that this person I'm with doesn't like drama, and I don't particularly. I've had no drama, and I do want to honor my marriage. It was a great marriage for a lot of
Mhm.
years, and I wouldn't have changed it for anything. It just things, and I think it's a good point. And this is a total side note, but I think just because something comes to an end, it doesn't mean it wasn't good. I think that's an important, and then we mutually support each other, and then hey, it comes to an end. But that, getting out of that addiction to drama, and being able to really see that other person, just like you said, to see them rather than seeing how they're affecting you and only looking at yourself, that is a beautiful thing. And that's where love really can, I think, can start to really flower, is when you really see the other person. I love that Stephen Covey, he said the deepest hunger of the human heart is to feel understood. And that's what we all want. And that's why mindful listening and hearing the other person is so important, and seeing that person, deeply seeing that person. And when you do, and then allowing yourself to be seen, to tell the truth and be seen warts and all, is, I think, a beautiful thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is probably the lesson of a lifetime. Because if you can see that person for who they really are and not look at yourself as anything else, then you have found someone that, you're very lucky.
You know, yeah, I was in this men's group, and at the end of we would take these men, we'd support other men, and through whatever they were dealing with, and at the end, after they were supportive, everybody would kind of make a half circle in front of them, and on the count of three, they would say, "We see you." And the person would say, "It's great to be seen," or whatever. But to really allow yourself to be seen, and to really see someone, is a beautiful thing. And there's so much that comes under that we could talk more about, right?
Yeah. No, but that, I think, to me, that's the final answer. When you're finally at peace with the peacefulness, and not looking for, anything to fight, or looking for that excitement. Because, you know, once you've learned how to heal, what you value most is your peace, your inner peace. And you're not ever, ever, ever going to negotiate that. No matter how much you care for that person, you're never going to negotiate your peace.
Yes. And I think that's a beautifully said, Nada. And I think it's important to say that if we were on a plane that was going down, we're not going to be worried about what's in our bank account. We're not going to be worried about how cool we've looked and how many social media followers we have. we're going to want to have that final call to the people who mean the most to us, or that one person.